This morning, prescription drugs are about to get a lot cheaper in Texas.
This is really an example of what we can do when we bring Democrats and Republicans together to solve problems in our state.
State Rep James Tallarico on the bipartisan bill, now likely headed to the governor's desk. A federal judge in North Texas limits access to the abortion pill. Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, though, from Houston, now moving ahead with legislation to legalize it. Growing calls for a Republican state representative to resign after what his attorney calls outrageous allegations. And Texas House Republicans want to let law-abiding citizens participate in border enforcement. State Rep Victoria Niave Criado on why that should worry you.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. Let's get straight to the top political headlines across our state right now. There are growing calls for State Representative Bryan Slaton to resign. He's a Republican who represents Greenville, Sulphur Springs, and Canton in North Texas. Slaton is accused of an inappropriate relationship with an office intern. His attorney, though, calls the accusations outrageous. Last month, the senior staff for Houston Democrat Jolanda Jones, they also quit. They wrote a letter accusing Jones's son of an inappropriate relationship also with an office intern. The state sales tax is not going down after all, despite an early bipartisan push. State Senator Royce West wanted to drop it by a half cent. The Dallas Democrat had support from Texas Republicans, including interest from Governor Greg Abbott. Senator West said lowering property taxes, that would not help renters, but dropping the sales tax would. West had to give up the plan a few days ago when support evaporated. And the Crown Act has finally passed the Texas House. It's now headed to the Texas Senate down the hall. It would protect people from being discriminated against because of their hairstyle if they are black or any other race. The House passed it 143-5. The Senate takes it up next. This is the farthest this bill has gotten. 20 other states, though, have already outlawed it. Let's start this morning, though, with the legal drama unfolding around access to abortion. Half of all abortions right now happen with a pill called mifepristone. But a federal judge in Fort Worth ruled that tablet was approved unlawfully. Courts are hashing it out this weekend, but a Texas congresswoman from Houston is trying to protect that pill. U.S. Representative Lizzie Fletcher this morning on her plan to keep it available.
Congresswoman, welcome back to the program. Your bill is called the Protecting Reproductive Freedom Act. If passed, the way I understand it, it would essentially protect the availability of mifepristone nationally and override any state laws that might pop up. But Republicans maintain that narrow majority in the House. Where do you see a path for victory to get this approved? Or is this just simply to keep the issue alive?
Well, thanks, Jason, for the question. Thanks for having me here. I think it's really important that we build a coalition around this bill and the effort that we have here that's reflected in our bill, the Protecting Reproductive Freedom Act, because what we see is that this case that was decided in the Northern District of Texas, now partially stayed by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, is really part of this ongoing effort to take away our freedom to make our own decisions about our bodies, our families, our futures, and our ability to have access to both information and resources and care that enable us to do that.
You called the ruling by the federal judge in Fort Worth potentially catastrophic. Couldn't women, though, still get this same medication, the mifepristone or other similar medication from overseas?
Well, what this does is prevents the approval for use in the United States, and so that is how the vast majority of American women get their health care at a trusted provider who is operating here in the United States. And frankly, there's no reason to do it. I mean, going back to the fundamentals here, the FDA has said this is safe and effective medication, that it has fewer complications than Tylenol. We're talking about a safe and effective medication. So really what this is about making it more difficult for women to access the health care that they need. And don't forget, this is an important medication for women who are having miscarriages. And we see that in Texas. We see women having miscarriages being sent home from the hospital because of the draconian state of our laws in Texas at this moment.
The U.S. Department of Justice says it's now going to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to step in on this case here. The court has a conservative majority. For those of us outside the Beltway here, should the Supreme Court take the case, are you concerned what its ruling might be?
Well, I think we saw last summer what the Supreme Court's ruling, the effect that the Dobbs decision had across the country. And of course, we should all be concerned because what we see is an absolute assault on our individual rights that we as Texans hold dear. But I think here the Department of Justice is right? And what we've seen both from the district court in Texas and from the Fifth Circuit, even though the Fifth Circuit stay provides some immediate relief, it really reinforces some dubious legal arguments. It undermines drug approval at the FDA, which creates chaos across the board. And of course, it limits access to mifepristone to the Americans who need it. So I think the Department of Justice is taking the right step in seeking emergency relief from the Supreme Court. But as you noted, we have seen the decisions coming out of the courts. There has to be a legislative solution here. And this matters to people across our country and certainly across the state of Texas. Research from the University of Texas showed last summer only 15% of Texans support the state of the law in Texas as it is today, with essentially a total ban on abortion. Only 15% of Texans. So there is a legislative solution here too. We've got to pass these protections in our legislatures, and we have to vote for people who are going to do that and who are going to protect our rights.
Congresswoman Fletcher, we appreciate the time. We'll be watching this bill. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.
All right, now to Austin and some state politics here. About 40 or so days left in the legislative session, and the biggest issue has really yet to get worked out. Not the budget, it's property taxes. And the question this morning, what will property tax relief look like? The state Senate passed one plan to raise your homestead exemption. The state House wants to reduce the rate the school districts can charge homeowners. One of those two plans is going to win. I am Mitra, the senior managing editor at the Texas Tribune. Good to see you. Which chamber is going to win? It seems like there's a growing amount of support behind the Senate's idea.
Yeah, well, if you looked at the debate in the House, which passed their kind of property tax relief plan this past week, there's Democrats who are actually kind of on the same page with, kind of with the majority of the Senate, which was, kind of in support of the homestead exemption. I mean, their amendment kind of got voted down in the House plan, which still focuses on kind of the appraisal cap. But it's a kind of an interesting dynamic where Democrats in the House are kind of lining up with where senators were lining up when it comes to property tax relief.
That's something to be watching here the next week or so. There's also a big change that you guys reported on in the Texas Tribune about how the state's community colleges are funded. How would that affect students specifically?
Yeah, this is a real interesting thing. And there was also a commission that really kind of recommended these changes. And it has the support not just of many lawmakers, but also of a lot of community college presidents. And the idea here is that the funding, state funding would go through more of a performance-based model rather than a kind of a student class hours kind of rate. And so the idea here is that there could be more performance incentives here for schools who are really trying to help students graduate and also or potentially transfer over to four-year universities. And so based on those numbers, the state funding would increase. And so I think there's a lot of support for that because it really focuses on outcomes. And so that's going to be a kind of a big change if it does pass, which it looks like it will.
All right, Ian, thanks a lot. Back to you in just a moment here.
Coming up, the bipartisan bill to drastically lower prescription drug costs. State Rep James Tallarico on how it will happen. And Texas Republicans want to recruit people without law enforcement experience to protect the border. State Rep Victoria Niave Criado on why that is so worrisome. Inside Texas Politics, back in just a moment.
Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. The GOP is proposing something it has never done before on the border. Republicans want to let untrained citizens, just regular Joes, help out with enforcement on the border. State Rep Matt Schaefer wrote the bill. He's a Republican from Tyler, and for weeks we have invited him on our program. His staff telling us that Schaefer just remains too busy. State Rep Victoria Niave Criado, though, is talking about this. The Dallas Democrat says this bill should concern every Texan.
Representative, welcome back to the program. House Bill 20 particularly stands out to a lot of people, not just the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, for that one line that says law-abiding citizens can participate in border operations. That seems unprecedented.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. One of the broad sweeping bills that we are dealing with this session is something that wouldn't just impact the border community. A new border protection unit actually has statewide impact. So when we think about Dallas, these civilians who are untrained could set up checkpoints in our own city, questioning us as Americans about whether we are citizens or not, and without consequence. The initial version of the bill had absolute immunity, criminal and civil immunity for these civilians in this new unit, which is of significant concern and should be of significant concern for every Texan. We shouldn't be questioned about whether we are Americans by this new unit that has broad sweeping consequences.
House Bill 20, at last check for me at least, was left pending in committee. It had not been voted out of the State Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives. Do you expect that to happen?
We are in ongoing discussions with the bill author as well as various other leaders in the Texas House about the language of the bill. And so
what are you asking to be changed? Are you asking to I mean, ideally it sounds like you'd like to throw it out, but I presume that there's something you'd like to be changed inside there?
There are numerous significant concerns, but I think the main thing is that you're essentially creating this new unit. You're taking powers away from DPS. There's already a shortage of law enforcement officers, and you're creating this entirely new system, this new, that's going to have little to no oversight. And so there's significant concern, even on the other side of the aisle, about the language of this legislation. And so we're going to continue to work on this, but we need folks to know that this isn't just a border bill. This is major, has statewide impact and ramifications for every Texan.
That's a good point about law enforcement, how difficult it is to find people who want to work as law enforcement officers today. Last question for you, though, Representative. If this were to pass, how do you think it would play out? What would it look like in the state?
I think when we think of, back home in Dallas, I'm at the Capitol right now, and we think of the hard work that law enforcement is doing to build up community relations. And you're going to have these civilians, non-law enforcement, that are going to be able to set up shop throughout the state, be able to pull people over. They can, under the law, arrest, detain, repel, even citizens. That's going to create a mess for our local law enforcement to clean up, which is of significant concern. We need to be building police community relations, not destroying them by having these civilian vigilantes operating throughout our state.
Representative, we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Right now, Texans pay some of the highest costs in the country for prescription drugs. In Austin, though, Democrats and Republicans are working together to lower what we pay for those drugs. The House already passed this bill. The Senate has it up next. And State Rep James Tallarico, who wrote the legislation, says it is likely now headed for the governor's desk. Representative Tallarico, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we've had you on here, but welcome back. More than a half dozen other states across the country already have this in place, or they're getting it in place right now. But give us an idea of what kind of drugs that Texans will be able to get cheaper.
Well, first, I think it's important to acknowledge that Texans pay twice what Canadians pay for their prescription drugs. And so the goal of this bill is to safely import those cheap prescription drugs from Canada so that we can save lives here in our state. And the estimates are that we could save anywhere from 60 to 70% on the price of commonly used prescription drugs, from asthma medication, blood pressure medication, cancer drugs, medication that people need for themselves and their families. We could get for a lot cheaper if we just opened the doors and allowed us to import those medicines from our neighbors to the north.
This was almost unanimous coming out of the House. There's a companion bill in the Senate as well. Do you expect this to clear the Senate? We have, 6 weeks or so left in the session?
I do. I'm really fortunate this is a bipartisan and bicameral bill. Senator Charles Perry, a Republican in the state Senate, is carrying it for me on the Senate side, and he expects a unanimous vote on this bill coming out of the Senate. And then from there, it'll go to the governor's desk for a signature. And so this is really an example of what we can do when we bring Democrats and Republicans together to solve problems in our state. And this is one of the biggest problems. You know, Texans pay the highest prescription drug prices in the world, more than any other industrialized nation. And that's why 42% of Texans ration or skip doses. And it's why 250,000 Americans die every year from not taking their medications. So the status quo is unacceptable. It's dangerously unsafe, and we've got to do something. I'm excited that lawmakers from both political parties are coming together to get this done.
And Representative Tallarico, if this is passed, which it sounds like it's on its way to being passed here, this will take effect September 1st of this year. How long until Texans could actually start taking advantage of this?
You know, that all depends on President Biden. I said 6 states have already done it. We would be the 7th. We would be the largest state to adopt this policy. And that's going to put pressure on President Biden, a member of my own party, to finally approve this.
So if this goes into effect September the 1st, we're still waiting on the federal government. I presume it could act before September the 1st, but if not, we're still just on the hook, right?
That's right. And you know what's been holding us up is a lawsuit from Big Pharma. Everyone supports this bill, Republicans, Democrats, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders. 78% of Americans support this plan. The only group that doesn't is Big Pharma, because we'd be putting the lives of Texans over their profits. Our bill puts people over profits. And there was a lawsuit by Big Pharma against these plans coming from states. That lawsuit just got thrown out of court in February. So I expect now, because that lawsuit has been dismissed, that we're going to start to see approval happening quicker at the federal level.
Representative, congratulations to you. Huge passage there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Coming up next, conservative commentator Tucker Carlson said that Governor Abbott should pardon a convicted murderer. But within hours, Abbott pledged to do just that. The politics of this pardon, next on the roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. I am Mitra, back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, let's start with you. A lot of attention nationally on the Tennessee State House. Is there a lesson in there for what happened in Tennessee for Texas Republicans?
Well, I think the lesson is something they could have learned if they'd gone over and asked the Titans head coach. He would have said, don't jump offside. You know, what happened in the Tennessee Republicans jumped offside. They overreacted. It wound up embarrassing the party. There is a step you can take that does embarrass the party. Republicans found out where that is.
Bernadine, what do you think? That are Texans just trying to separate themselves from what happened there in Tennessee?
You know what, I don't think that they want to be identified with what happened,
Sure.
But keep in mind, our Texas Republicans are interested in what their primary voters want. And if the primary voters are comfortable with you expelling Democrats, then they would do it. But I think that at this point it was so embarrassing that I think they just want to move past that particular episode.
And it seems to me, just watching the Texas legislature doesn't have the same dynamics, doesn't have the same issues as what's happening in Tennessee, fortunately. But sure, I think, Bernadine, you're squinting your eyes at me. Do you think they do?
Of course, because their whole issue in Tennessee is about disenfranchising certain voters. And then their anger over what those Democratic state lawmakers did, it was over disenfranchising their particular voters by not addressing the gun issue. So that's what's happening in Texas. I just don't think at this point, as you said, the dynamics, because keep in mind, our state doesn't have a supermajority.
Yeah.
So they can't do that particular thing, and it might not be in their, when they start what they're going to do at the beginning. But I don't think that if they got the opportunity, they would probably do it if they thought it would work. Because see, keep in mind, Tennessee thought it would work until the aftermath.
And until it didn't work.
Yes.
Let's talk about the other big story, Ian, this week as well, and that's Governor Abbott pledging to pardon a convicted murderer only after he got pressure from Tucker Carlson, the Fox News commentator. Talk about the politics of this. We've seen Abbott bend to the right during COVID, and he's doing it again right now.
And certainly we saw a response from the governor too, after some criticism regarding actions on the border too. I mean, what's interesting here too is if you look at as how the governor has kind of addressed kind of death penalty cases in the past. I mean, he's largely kind of acted more in terms of acts of compassion. He's reduced one sentence from a death sentence to life in prison for one. And he's largely not gotten involved with some other appeals. So it's really interesting to also see from a historical perspective how the governor's weighed in.
And Bud, we have seen countless Republican rallies where the GOP touts that we are the party of law and order. This might have people questioning that.
Well, law and order and upholding the system and standing up for the justice system, the jury system, this flies in the face of all that. And in particular, the governor may not have waited long enough to see most of the evidence. He reacted to a case where it looked like a stand your ground case. Are you required to step back? No, you're not. If someone's approaching you with a gun, at what point does that become murder? The Travis County jury made their decision, and now it'll go to appeal.
Bernadine?
You know what? Keep in mind now, he did say he would do it after it was recommended to him by the Pardon and Parole Board, so he took cover. But I want to believe that the governor has more information than we see on the surface, because to pledge to release a convicted killer is worrisome. And I really don't think that he believes that he would have to.
And maybe he does get that cover if the Board of Pardons and Paroles decides it doesn't want to make that recommendation to him. We'll find out about that. Guys, thank you so much. We appreciate the time. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics and hope you can join us then. Take care.